Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. We're coming to you from the UPDF headquarters in Kampala. Thanks for joining us, and we have another privilege of speaking to General Felix Kulayigye, who is the Director of the Defense Public Information Office. And of course, we will be speaking about different issues, including the video that went viral of one Noop supporter who was dragged out of the court-martial. There are reports that he was beaten to pulp. We'll speak about that. We'll also speak about the changes within the army and the establishment report that was passed by President Yoweri Museveni. What really is in it for all of us to know? Welcome to the program. Afande, thank you so much for accepting once again for being on the show. I mean, it's always a pleasure hosting you.
I give all the glory and honor to God.
How have you been?
Well.
Okay, great. It's only fair that we start from the most recent news that broke about the National Unity Platform supporters who have been on remand for over 3 years, close to 20 months. They were presented before the court-martial, which is led by Brigadier Freeman Robert Mugabe. What we saw on television and in the print left many of us wondering what really happened. We saw someone being dragged out. That's Muhyiddin Kakoza. Many of the reporters were in court said he was beaten, among other supporters were beaten, and he was dragged dragged and thrown into the car. But I just wanted to hear from, and you released a statement in your response, and the statement read in part, the UPDF therefore condemns in the strongest terms possible such acts of hooliganism and will not hesitate to request the court-martial authorities to take legal actions against those involved. The sanctity of the court must be respected at all times. What did you gather from the court?
I need to make several corrections in your statement. Correction number one, we have no Noop supporters on remand in the court-martial. We have suspects in the court-martial. I would like to go on record. No one is in the court-martial because he or she supports Noop. Not at all. These are individuals who were arrested throwing petrol bombs at cars. Some even did cause bodily harm on certain individuals they assaulted. They were not arrested for supporting any political party, because supporting a political party in this country is legal. It's legitimate. But in the media world, you have persistently misinformed yourselves and the public that we are trying Noop supporters. That's not our case. Number two, you are talking of dragging. The picture you saw, somebody was being carried. The two are different, unless English has changed meanings.
Did you see the clip that circulated from NTV?
The person was carried.
When he could barely stand.
No, first let's agree on the wording, because they have different meanings altogether. Dragging means you pull on the ground. The person was carried, that's true. That's what I wanted to correct. No one was dragged out of court. 3, I don't know what is his name you are telling me is called Kakoza. Huh?
Yes.
Mr. Sirwanja, Kakoza jumps out of the dog and goes for the neck of the chairman of the court-martial, General Robert Freeman Mugabe. You expected Kakoza to be massaged and smeared with Vaseline as people are rescuing the chairman of the court? You see, in this country, we are turning wrong things into the right way to do things. You have a right to apply for bail. court reserves the right to agree to your request or to reject it. Not so.
Basing on what you've submitted.
Exactly. But the prerogative to grant bail remains with the court martial or with the court, whatever court. Now, Kakoza jumps to the neck of the chairman. Members of parliament decide when he's being evacuated, the chairman being evacuated, to block him. Are we actually in a civilized society? Or we want hooliganism to be the order of the day in managing public affairs? I would like to go on record. We have no apology on how we handled Kakoza. When you touch fire and it burns you, do you blame fire? Do you? To use your mother tongue, tubajinyize ekimala. We have been handling you with kid gloves and you think that should be the order of the day. Check elsewhere. You can't do such in court. You can't. I have always reminded you.
You think the way they handled him and beat him to pulp?
No, he wasn't beaten to pulp.
The man could barely stand.
Did you try to make him stand and see?
Why was he carried, in your own words?
Because he himself was not willing to move. And we have an option. If you resist moving, we carry you.
General Kulayigye, they beat that man up.
Solomon Serwanja, you do not attack the chairman of the court and you expect to be begged to move out. You'll be carried away.
Did your men beat Kakoza?
I am not aware. And I cannot affirm or reject what I don't know. What I'm sure, he was carried out.
But you said that, did we expect him to be massaged and be smeared?
Yes, that's why he was carried away.
The footage and evidence that is shown, that you've seen as well, is one that the
Bottom line, Mr. Solomon Serwanja, I am not going to debate the indiscipline on the chairman of the General Court Martial. I won't.
General Kulayigye, you said you have no apology whatsoever.
I do not have an apology for someone who attacks the chairman of the court martial in his court chambers. I cannot. The handling of that person depended on the guards inside the court. The suit is tailored according to the size of the cloth and the person being measured.
Wouldn't an arrest be enough?
What did they do?
They beat the man up.
Did you see that them beating him? Do you have evidence that they beat this man? You know, I've been trying to be diplomatic. Now I'm asking you, do you have evidence that this man was beaten?
The evidence we have is the pictures that we have when he's dragged out.
Exactly. So he's being, and I refuse that word dragging, because dragging, unless you don't know English, sir, dragging is pulling on the ground. This man was carried out. And if carrying out is beating, then I am going back to English class.
Let me go back to using your words. You said you do not apologize in the way he was treated. What did you mean?
He had to be carried out. That's what I saw. Because when you are a civilized person, you are requested to walk out and you walk out. When you called me for an interview, I walked out of my office. You didn't have to lift me out of my office.
Your narrative seems like you were on ground. Were you in court, General Kulayigye?
You expect me not to know what happened in my own court? The General Court Martial is a military court.
I mean, we are talking about evidence, aren't we?
Yes, and that's why I'm telling you, me, I'm not aware of the beating you're talking about. I am represented in that court martial as a general of the army.
Let's talk about what you mentioned about in your report or in your press statement that you issued, that you will not allow this hooliganism, especially from members of parliament who tried to behave inappropriately before court. And you mentioned in your report that the General Court Martial remains committed to dispensing justice and that the UPDF will not allow the sanctity of court to be disrespected.
Yes.
You mentioned that members of parliament acted inappropriately.
First of all, they shouted in the court. Two, when the chairman was being evacuated after that hooliganism of the Kakwaza fellow, they blocked him from moving out. Where have you seen this in the world, Mr. Serwanja? Where? That the judge of the court will be stopped from transacting business in his courtroom. Where have you seen it? And all remains normal. Just tell me.
Let's talk about the operations of the military court. You've held people and put them on remand for over 3 years without any full trial, which is contrary to the very court's operation. General Kulayigye,
Yes.
you've held people for 20 months, 3 years, without going for full trial. They're on remand.
Yes.
Does that sound fair to you?
Again, you are doing what exactly we are condemning. You want me to interfere with the proceedings of the court?
No, because you said this country is run by rule of law.
Yes.
And there are laws that govern military court.
Absolutely.
You've kept these people for 3 years.
If court is not ready to try them, you cannot dictate to them to try the suspects.
Why isn't the court ready to try them? Yet they were arrested
I cannot answer.
on allegations. I'm trying to say, General,
Yes.
you have people who are in your custody or in the
Yes.
custody of the military court for 3 years without
I
trial.
wanted to remind you that they're actually in the custody of the Uganda Prison Service.
I know,
Because Kitali is not our prison.
I know, but I'm just saying that they're before the court martial for 3 years.
True.
Why
And
haven't-
the court-
Why hasn't the court gone to full trial and try them and then sentence them?
It's up to the jurisdiction of the court. I cannot answer. I am not the chairman of the court. We do not interfere with the works of the court. That's not how we do business in the military. The court is independent. Not even the CDF will order them. So, you see, handling matters that are legal in nature or that are for public interest, you don't apply emotions. You must follow procedure.
Procedure dictates that when you present people before the courts of law,
And
they
you
are
think-
hard and they are
And you
going
think
to
by,
full trial.
by shouting in the court, you are actually helping the suspect?
It may not be that, but maybe may be out of frustration for people who have applied for bail 3 times.
There
and
are
they have been
procedures when you are
denied.
frustrated.
They
There are
have been
procedures when you are not
denied,
happy.
and they have not gone into full trial.
Sir, in the civilized world, when you're not happy with the way things are being done, there are procedures you take. You don't use violence. When you use violence, you get back a reaction. Just Newton's law. Every action has a reaction.
General, has the military court martial been used for political gains?
No. To gain what?
As a political weapon to the regime?
Please
Are you
educate me.
surprised that civilians are tried in the court martial, military court martial?
When you are a civilian and you commit crimes using methods that are used by either military or paramilitary ways, then we have no choice. You see, if you want to avoid the court martial, don't indulge in military activities. Mr. Serwanja, is throwing petrol bombs a normal activity? Please educate me. Is it?
Has evidence been presented to court?
No, that's not. Again, you're
Because
taking
you
me
are-
back in the courtroom.
I'm just saying, General, by the time you arrest someone, you must have evidence that they did it and present them before court
Yes.
that they actually had explosives.
I would think.
And that's
I would
that's
think-
the case that they have opened up against them.
I would think the
Treachery and having explosives. But for 3 years, the military court has not tried people with explosives.
Can I ask, have you been that court?
I have reported at the military court martial so many times.
And
And there's a general feeling that the military court has somewhat been used for
there's
other
a difference
reasons.
between feeling and observation. Are we going by feelings?
General, do you want me to go back to the trial, the different trials that have been placed before the military court martial, some of which have just been, after a certain objective has been met, they just seem to, say we've dropped the case.
By the way, which objective? I have asked you, and up to now you have not told me. What political achievement have you seen being the motive behind somebody's trial in a court martial? Which one?
That's the point.
We have had people who have had issues, political cases. They were not in the court martial. They were in the High Court, they were in the Court of Appeal, not in the court martial. So you are trying to insinuate that the general court martial is actually a political tool. And I would like to get evidence to this allegation.
General, you know clearly the former Minister for Security, who occupied that office, was placed before the military court martial, put on remand, and his case later on was dismissed.
Is it the first case to be dismissed in the legal fraternity?
After a while.
Let me ask.
For such cases that
is that the first case to be dismissed in the legal fraternity or in the history of courts?
The case that was placed before him.
Yes.
The military kept postponing without, and then eventually they lost interest in the case. The person who was prosecuting it lost interest in the case, and he was just let free.
Court can lose interest in a case. It's not the first one. It's not only the military. It's not a preserve of the court martial. Cases can be dismissed. So I'm in shock that you are actually putting a brand on the court martial about case dismissals or cases where the prosecution has lost interest. It's a normal practice in the legal fraternity. You are not aware? You have not had the cases. By the way, I talk of this. Have you heard of somebody who was in jail for 35 years, convicted of a crime he never committed in the United States of America?
Those have come.
Yeah. So why you?
I am just asking legitimate questions of
I wonder who determines the legitimacy
of how you arrest civilians with allegations that they have petrol bombs.
Mr. Serwanje.
But you have taken 3 years without trying them. They have asked for bail because it's their constitutional right.
Yes.
And the court they have presented, the first time they dismiss them because of sureties. They present better sureties. The court once again says, well, we don't think it's inevitable to give you bail, go back. People have come 3 times before the court martial. The court martial has denied them bail, go back, and they have given their reasons. I mean, I do not want to condone the actions of going for the neck of...
well, you seem to be trying to justify that.
No, I'm not justifying that. But I'm just saying people can only take in so much because they have done everything they have done to ensure that they get bail. They have presented the sureties. They have met all the requirements. But court in its wisdom decides to say, this is not enough, go back.
Mr. Serwanje, when you are unhappy with the decision of the court, there is a procedure. Isn't it? Does it exist or it doesn't?
It does.
Thank you very much. So, when you come to begin asking me about violence exhibited in a court, a legitimate legal court, and you want me to begin answering questions why somebody is carried out of court, you seem to have come to condone what had happened there. Let me ask, for how long are you going to intimidate the state into abandoning legal procedures to accept illegality, to accept chaos, to accept hooliganism? You shout in a court, you are supposed to be arrested for contempt of court. And you're aware somebody had ever been put in custody for contempt of court. You know, a lawyer in this town, for trying to bring these misbehaviors. You think you are dealing with a riffraff, not an army that is professional. You are questioning why court is postponing. That is a question for the court. I cannot answer.
General Felix Kulayigye, if you were that person who was presented before court and remanded for 3 years without trial, and every time you presented your bail application to court, it's denied.
Mr. Sirwanja, I've been before the court myself as a suspect. So you're not telling me anything I don't know. The point I'm making, we cannot abandon the legal procedures because of sentiments. Number two, this is not politics. And I've asked a question. They are prominent NUP leaders. Why aren't they not in that court? I mean, why aren't they in that court? If there are people on trial because they are NUP supporters.
I'll read to you the reaction of Bobby Wine, of the Honorable Robert Chagulanyi, who posted after he released a statement about what happened in court. And he says, when tyranny becomes the law, rebellion becomes a duty. May history be kind to you, Comrade Sanya Muhyiddin Kakoza, for courageously standing up to General Museveni and his kangaroo military court. You exemplify nothing but extraordinary courage. Your comment on that?
High sounding words of a man benefiting from this status quo. Or should I remind you that the only entity that has a legitimate and legal right to raise an army or hold means of violence is the state. And Mr. Sirwanja, the moment the state loses monopoly of the means of violence, that state collapses. And when the state collapses, you and I want to enjoy the status quo.
That was his reaction.
And you think I'm surprised? And I've told you the words I've used are deliberate. Mr. Sirwanja, you're aware, I never throw my words anyhow.
All right, let's maybe shift gears and talk about, we're building up to elections. Politics is beginning to take center stage as we get towards the 2026 general elections.
Yes, sir.
The army is usually called in to support the police in maintaining security and providing protection to Ugandans and their property.
Yes, sir.
The previous elections, we saw, some really terrible things done by Uganda security forces during the elections. Should we expect better this time?
First and foremost, we are heading for elections, not war. Right? I would wish we agree step by step. We are heading for elections, not war. What does that mean? We as security agencies expect maximum cooperation with the Uganda police from the politicians and the political actors. Once you register cooperation, you do not expect anything else but cooperation given back to you. 3, whatever you saw, like I said, Newton's law, every action has a reaction. One vivid case that keeps coming to my mind was one presidential candidate driving through a police checkpoint. And the policemen had to scamper for their dear lives. If that's not terrible, then we are sorry for how we behave.
You have had cases of the army beating people.
True. And those that we have had evidence about have been put on trial for misconduct.
And you have apologized on behalf of the army.
And we have apologized on behalf of the army. So we don't deny that some of us behave outside the legal and legitimate ways of handling suspects, of handling situations. But that does not give anybody a ticket to say because we always apologize up the level of CDF, Therefore, you provoke soldiers to misbehave or to mishandle you. My humble request on behalf of the UPDF, when the electioneering process starts, we appeal to the political actors to abide by the law. That's it.
General Kulayigye, you have someone who is now leading the National Army, who was active in politics.
Yes.
And has expressed himself for the country's top job before. I'll insist. Who has also pushed back against some key opposition leaders. Who is now in charge of the army? Do we then expect a leveled playing field in the 2026 general elections?
Your question
with
is
General
is
Muhoozi as the leader of the National Army and the father, who is President Yoweri Museveni, on the ballot. My question is, will the army do what it's supposed to do to provide equitable security for all political players to compete in the elections?
the answer is yes, because our roles are very clear. Our roles are security of the country during elections, right? To protect it from attack or external interference in the elections. Number two, we do not protect election practitioners. It's the police. Ours, it will reinforce police in protection areas where they require beef up. But number three, and I want to insist on my line, much as you insisted on yours, both of us have a right to do so. Right? Your source, you see it is his Twitter handle. And I've insisted, I'm interested on the day he said on the microphone, I want to be the top job of the country. Number two, where he has pushed against politicians, you mentioned. And lastly, number three, being politically active is not a crime. In fact, I may inform
Says
you,
a general of the National Army.
this army is not a political. It's non-partisan.
General, do you want us to go down that line?
You have engaged him in political discussions before, Mr. Serwanja. You remember or you have forgotten?
General Kulayigye, you
have you or you have not?
General Kulayigye, I have. But you were the political commissar, and therefore your role at that time was
exactly.
You're talking about, you want us to go that line, really?
We can go.
You're talking about a general who is right now the CDF and former commander of the Lands Forces.
Yes.
Politically active.
He wasn't politically active. He was practicing politics as a senior presidential advisor on special operations. And that's a political office, my brother.
I can't believe this is coming from a Kulayigye I know.
Excuse me. Do not blackmail me, and I will not accept it. I have told you, and I remember some of your colleagues were asking me about the things he was saying then. And they said he was not.
He was just practicing.
He was practicing politics as a senior presidential advisor. I remember I said that very clearly. Now, you cannot use what he did in his former office and you want to use it to judge how he's going to perform. You're even speculating how he's going to perform as a CDF. I know speculation has become a method of work in this country. But when we're discussing national issues, speculation should not be used. You have cases of bishops who have discussed politics. Why don't you ask them? They have made political statements on the pulpit. Mr. Sriwanja. Go and read the Hans Clausewitz. What does he say about politics? Or war? He actually says war is politics by other means. Who executes war? It's the men and women in uniform. Voila. I rest my case, sir.
At least I asked that question because all of us have been asking, with General Muhoozi Kainerugaba CDF, what will the elections look like? And you've answered it. You've said that the army will do a professional job.
The army will do a professional job in protecting the country, in ensuring stability. The army has no political party it supports. But this arm of yours is politically conscious. And we have no apology on that matter.
What do you mean politically conscious?
We are not robots.
Interesting.
Serwanja, you have a clan, don't you?
I do.
The clan of this army is evolution.
It's NRA, which transformed into
Revolution.
NRM.
No. No. The NRA transformed to UPDF. The beginning of this army is Popular Resistance Army, NRA, now UPDF. Your NRM had its political wing, it continued with politics. And it became a party. And that's why I have not seen us. I may have to remind you, in 2001, we participated in the campaigns. Do you remember? We campaigned. Come 2006, you didn't see us in campaigns. Why? You had gone political party. Multi-party is my mean. We are very careful on how we move. When you were still a movement, which all of us belonged to, we participated. When you took to party politics, we got out of party politics because we never belonged there and stayed where we are. And so campaigns, no. And so whether you come putting on green or red or yellow, for me, you're a Ugandan who is a political actor.
Well, I'm just really taking in.
I conclude on this note. Okay? Being a politician is not a ticket to misconduct. And I'm speaking those words from my heart.
Why? Where is this coming from?
From the recent past.
Tell me more.
Some people think by being politicians, they have a right to misbehave. Or you want us to produce now photographic evidence and documentary?
Let's continue on that line with the establishment report that was signed, which was interesting to see how it played out. To date, people perhaps may not clearly understand the key issues, but at least from some of the videos I've watched of you addressing the media, the establishment report is supposed to, further professionalize the army and strengthen the army.
Further professionalization.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
That's the word I've used. I'm glad that you've re-emphasized it.
Yes, sir.
But the establishment report sort of gives the CDF, there's been some sort of shifting of power that would have been made by the commander-in-chief to the chief of defense forces. Tell me about the key issues in this establishment report so that we clearly understand it. Beyond just the renaming of the departments and...
Why do you think I'm smiling?
I don't know.
You know, you people in the public domain amuse me. I'm glad now for you asking, because some people assumed they understood what it meant. There is no transfer of authority from the commander-in-chief to the CDF. If you recall, there was a document signed by the commander-in-chief. True or not? And it said, I'm vesting delegated authority to the CDF to command all. You remember? Now, some of you interpreted, oh, now we are seeing transfer of power. Some people even got excited. And I laughed my way home that day with the first time I saw these comments.
Tell us about that statement.
If you recall, let me give a historical background. In 2004, we undertook a defense reform, a review and a reform, which determined the outlook of the UPDF. Outlook, what do I mean? How many services do we need to respond to what threats? What threats have we identified to the country? And 75% of the threats we identified were non-military in nature, but they are threats to the country. Natural disasters, famine. 3, terrorism. The unconventional military threats. So we embarked on building the UPDF to deal with those anticipated threats. Okay? That's how Air Force develops into full service. Special Forces is built, which is still undergoing building anyway. That's how a reserve force is introduced, it's being built, and of course the land forces who are used too. Now, all these services, which are 4 now, have commanders. Okay? Commanders answer now to the Chief of Defense Forces. So what the statement meant was to streamline the command and the control and the management of the entire UPDF. All these services put together. So the establishment, which was made in 7 years, by the way, looked at now how you create the relationship between the joint headquarters, this is called joint headquarters, to the headquarters of the services. What will be the relationship? What will be the command relationship? What about resource management, both human, financial, and material? So the establishment sets out the procedures, the mechanisms to be followed by both the joint headquarters in dealing with the service headquarters, and as well the service headquarters in associating with the joint headquarters. That was the whole purpose.
But the CDF right now has, after the establishment, the CDF now has, you don't want to say that now, but you've just put it easy that the CDF now will manage all these different divisions, and people interpreted it as like now the power has now been centralized to the position of the CDF.
No, that has been the practice. Okay? What the statement did was now to document the practice. Maybe I may put it this way, that previously, maybe a service commander would simply inform that I'm traveling or I will be out of my station. All right? And if it is information, the CDF may say yes or no. But now, if you are to move out of your station, the CDF must authorize your movement. Mm-hmm. Okay? The other time, as a service commander, say you are going to do pre-shipment inspection of the equipment you want to use, you will simply inform him, I'm going. But now, he must be part and parcel of the decisions being made for the development of that particular service.
Interesting. Okay. While handing over office, I listened quite closely to what General Salim Saleh said to General Muhoozi, that he had jumped out of the cart and out of the bag and he was running. So he said, "Are you really back?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, if you're back, then welcome us. We welcome you back." But he also said that we should clap for him for also accepting him to be back. And I don't want to take you back to your statement of saying he was just practicing politics as a commander, but that's maybe a subject for another day. Let me conclude this interview by talking about...
That doesn't answer your question, actually. Doesn't the comments of General Saleh actually answer your question.
They actually demystify what you are saying, because General Saleh's comments demystify what you are saying.
How?
I mean, clearly, you read between the lines. The man was welcomed back to the fold, and that's to the army.
Yes, because what he was doing before was outside the army. Very clear. There's no contradiction between his statements and mine. He was doing what he was outside the army. Now he's back in full-time military service.
So what was he doing outside the army?
Political work. Mobilization.
A serving military officer in a UPDF uniform.
The commander-in-chief has authority to deploy a general or a military officer where he deems it fit.
Let's conclude this interview by talking about the situation in Karamoja. And I know that we have had these conversations before. What's the status like? We had killings that happened there
When?
some time ago, and we last talked about it when I was here with you. Has everything, have the guns been silenced? Have the deaths reduced? What's happening in Karamoja?
I expected you to bring me a feedback vis-a-vis what I promised you. Because in our last interview, I promised you that the situation was going to change for the better. And I want to reiterate, it has absolutely and tremendously improved for the better. Whereas you remember you are talking about, say, 20 people killed or 10 people killed by warriors. Today, it's ordinary criminality like it is in Kampala or elsewhere. The people who are found with guns now, 1 or 2 in a week. So there's been fundamental improvement. There were gaps that time, you remember I told you, we filled the gaps, and the situation in Karamoja, we are talking of development. I'm very sure if the...
But there was a National Unity Platform mobilizer was killed. That came to your attention, right?
Yeah, but killed by who?
I don't know, sir.
The other people have been killed in Karamoja. We encountered the warriors, raiders, and among them was even a vice chairman of LC3. But you see, you know, at times I get amused. If I had the freedom to indulge in these party discussions.
But that man was a Ugandan.
Exactly.
Beyond just being a National Unity Platform.
That's why I'm curious. Why do you have to point out that he was a noob person?
It's not only him. Other people have been killed, but I'm just saying that he was one of the people who was shot 15 times.
By criminals.
Is that what the security intelligence report shows?
According to you, who shot him?
I don't know, sir. I'm just asking.
And it's curious for me to be that you are only pointing out that individual. There are several individuals in Karamoja who have lost their lives to criminals.
As we close, I want to give you a second to send a message to Ugandans.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Ugandans have an opportunity to continue growing their country. But to grow the country and grow with it, you must be having something you sell. Right now, you are working. You expect to earn. I am working, I expect to earn. Someone should be selling, therefore, either your brains, your hands, which is labor, or your product. I would request Ugandans to endeavor to indulge in production. Many young people are spending time on Man U, Arsenal, Chelsea. The people they are watching are earning, and for them they are not earning.
General Felix Kulayigye, thank you for having given us some time to come back and talk about these issues. It's really an honor hosting you all. Every time I call you allow. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
First of all, I am humbled by your appreciation, but take it from me. We at your service as UPDF. And when you have issues you want to know from us, we must give them to you.
Thank you very much, General Kulayigye.
You're welcome.
I have been speaking to General Felix Kulayigye, my very good friend and the Director, Defense Public Information Office at the Ministry of Defense and at the UPDF headquarters. I'm Solomon Serwanja, and this is The Hard Questions.